Hey guys, welcome back to Epicenter Garage. Now, if you're new to the channel, on this channel, this is basically where I attempt to maintain all the cars in my collection and bring you guys along for the good and a lot of times, sometimes the bad. And today is no different. Today I'm working on my 1985 and a half SVO Mustang here, and a little higher on the other lift is my 1993 Nissan Skyline, or better known as an R32 GT-R. I'm gonna bring you guys along, show you what I'm doing on these cars, because it's, well, they're quite different cars, as you might already imagine. And then if I get enough time, I'll also show you the other cars that are getting ready to replace these cars on the lift, because they're awaiting their turn to get on these two lifts to get a lot of maintenance done as well. So let's get started. Well, let's start with the Mustang right here. So this is my 1985 and a half SVO Mustang. This color is called jalapeno red. This car actually has cloth interior as well, where a lot of SVO Mustangs actually had leather interior. I prefer the cloth simply because it tends to just, or at least through the years, it would hold up a little bit better. The leathers, it would just tend to crack, at least in SVOs anyway. A lot of ones I've looked at enough SVOs, and a lot of times if they have leather interior, they just tend to crack and not, I don't know, if just the leather is really thin in SVOs, and it just never held up very well. Of course, you have your bolster systems right here. Literally in cars, they still use Velcro, so it'd stick right to the carpet. So you have your valve systems here. You can actually pump your side bolsters up, which work really well. A lot of times the bladders in these cars start to leak and they no longer work. See the dash here as well. A lot of times the dashes tend to dry out, and so you can put kind of a moisturizer, but well, it is some moisturizer on the dash that keeps kind of, I don't want to call it the hair cell, but it's kind of a plastic grit finish that will keep that nice. And then the dash at the top as well is really nice without any cracks. I did replace the headliner. I did that not too long ago, simply because it was hanging down in a lot of SVOs. That happened in a lot of Fords anyway of this era. Really thin material on the top, and so the glue would start to deteriorate, and then it would just sit there and drag on your head or hit the top of your head and start flapping if you had the windows down. So I purchased this car roughly, oh my gosh, probably about nearly 15 years ago from a gentleman up in Wisconsin, or not Wisconsin, goodness, I'm slipping. Purchased from a guy in Michigan. So he had lots of cars. He advertised this car, not with a picture or anything. He advertised it in Hemmings, actually the book, not online back then anyway. And so that was the day, you know, you would go to a grocery store, and I would go through, of course, go right to Fords and the Porsches and all that type of stuff in those books. I'd never buy one, but I did buy this one simply because it had this SVO Mustang listed for sale. All it said is 85 and a half SVO Mustang, red, 20,000, I think it was 20 or 21,000 miles. And I think the price, I can't even remember, it was maybe $11,000 or $10,000, right around there. And a phone number. And so I called the gentleman up and talked with him, older gentleman. He had several cars. Whoops, I literally walked over scales. I was weighing, not to get sidetracked, I was weighing the 15-inch wheel off of the Cosworth, the wheel from the SVO Mustang, and the wheel from the GT-R. Sorry about that, I did get sidetracked as I stepped over a scale. Well, if you did want to know, the Cosworth wheel is much lighter. Then the GT-R wheel weighs 40 pounds and the SVO wheel weighs about 46 pounds. Knowledge you really didn't need to know today, I know that. Getting back to this SVO, I purchased it from him. He had lots of different cars. I called him up. He eventually sent me Polaroid pictures of this car. And what was really interesting is that of all the cars he had, this was the only real modern car that he owned. He had several Fords. He was a Ford, he loved Ford. So he had a Ford Model T, a Ford Model A, he had like a 32 Roadster, then this SVO Mustang, and this thing stood out like a sore thumb. He was ready to move on. He was I believe he was in his upper 70s, and we came to a price and had it shipped in. And you know, I've talked about this before, like when you kind of roll the dice, I really wasn't going to go up to Michigan to look at a $11,000 car. And so I kind of rolled the dice, and when it arrived, oh man, I just fell in love. And one of the main reasons why is simply because Back in the day when I started my business, I had an opportunity to buy an SVO Mustang in Eureka, Illinois. They had one for sale in the dead of winter on the backside of their lot, had a blown turbo in it, and they wanted $8,000 for it, but it's identical to this car. I passed on that car simply because I needed a four-door car to be able to hold a robotic device, basically earthquake simulators that I was building and starting to sell to start my business. And I ended up buying a 1991 SHO Taurus, which I still actually have, but I always regretted, I don't want to say I regretted buying the SHO because that's been and it still is a fantastic car, but I really wanted an SVO Mustang simply because, you know, Mustangs, at least the SVO, when Ford was getting, well, they've always been into racing, but they built the SVO to go showroom stock racing. Four-cylinder, I believe it was the first Mustang with four-wheel disc brakes, and back then they were like, I want to say they were 11.8 or 12-inch front rotors, which that was big. Those are huge brakes back then. And of course, you know, they had the special suspension. They were literally set up to road race. And you know, I love racing, and so I wanted an SVO so bad. Didn't really have the money. I saved up $8,000. Well, didn't save up money. I literally saved up enough money to go get a loan for $8,000 to put towards a down payment on a car. I ended up buying the SHO, which worked out great, but I always wanted an SVO Mustang. I was able to finally go find one, and this was the car. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this car. Now, as far as maintenance, this car has needed minimal maintenance. But what I did need to do, and I've always done oil change and stuff, but when I first bought this car, it had sat for a long time and the suspension was really starting to go, especially the front. It never drove like, you know, I would imagine, or probably never drove like an SVO Mustang right out of the showroom floor. I purchased, as now I just literally stepped over all the nuts. So now I'm gonna have to find all the nuts for the GT-R later. So sorry about that. I went ahead and purchased new KYB shocks, got those mounted. So you see here, I also have new calipers or rebuilt calipers. I did put on the disc brakes not too long ago, updated brakes, because the brakes were starting to go, well, the rotors and everything looked pretty bad. New shocks on the front and on the rear here, as well as new pads, new rotors too. And of course, here are the shock bushings underneath. I just got that finally done. The neat thing too about this car is that it was purchased not too far from here, brand new anyway. So this was purchased from Bo Beckman Ford, which I believe that's in Ellisville, Missouri. So not too far away from here. And I would just imagine the day, or back in the day, you know, 1985, 86, you know, going into a Ford dealership and driving away in a brand new SVO Mustang. Oh, that would have been awesome. That would have been absolutely fantastic. It has about 28,000 miles on it now. And I just finished doing the oil change on it. You can see in here in the engine. Now, you guys know, now this one, of course, 85.5 had the, and 85.5 and 86 had the flush headlights. So the 84s, if you guys are not Mustang enthusiasts, the 84s actually had headlights that sunk back into the bumper right here. Now, of course, when we get into horsepower and stuff, the 85.5 had the most horsepower, not by a lot, at least compared to the 85 and the 86. So that what happened, basically what occurred was 1984, the SVO came out, 175 horsepower, 205 foot-pounds of torque, I believe. Then 85, 200 horsepower, I want to say 210 foot-pounds of torque, right around there, maybe more than that. You guys can correct me in the comments. And then in 1985.5, they increased the boost a little bit more, and the horsepower jumped up to 205. They did a few other changes. And then 1986, actually the horsepower went from 205 back down to 200. But from 1984 to 85 or 85.5 and 86, you know, the torque was considerably more. So these put out about nearly 250 foot-pounds of torque. So like in third gear, even fourth gear, they'll flat get up and go. Of course, these were outrunning or faster than the V8 Mustangs back in the day. And of course, on a racetrack or a road course, especially on a tight course, they could easily outrun the GT Mustangs. Yeah, this has been a dream car of mine for a long time, and I have really enjoyed it. And I hope this is the car I never, ever have to sell. Now we'll move over to the Nissan. So this is my 1993 Nissan or R32 GT-R Skyline. This car I purchased about, oh man, I'm terrible about this, but 3 years ago, I believe, right around there. I haven't had it for all that long, but it's got 197,000 kilometers on it, which, you know, when I bought it, you know, it had obviously less than that. I think right around 190,000 kilometers on it. I wasn't going to buy it simply because the mileage was, I don't want to say it was outside of my range, but you know, at that mileage, you start to wonder overall condition. Does it have, you know, a lot of them at that mileage have some rust, or they have all kinds of variable issues. But when I drove this car, it drove like a brand new car. Now, granted, this was the very first GT-R that I'd ever driven, and I've driven some since then, and this car still, comparing, you know, this one, even with the mileage that it has to others, it drives fantastic. And of course, when I did buy it, I put it up, or right before I bought it, I put it up on a lift, checked it all out. And yeah, it has a little bit of surface rust, just like any normal car, especially cars from Japan, but no major rust in it. You guys know, if you guys know out there, GT-Rs, there's particular areas you want to look at on these cars to kind of give you at least the, you know, the first page of the book, whether or not, you know, the car's going to have any issues, which obviously, like the shock towers, they tended to rust out. Some other areas below on the bottom, they would start to rust, so you can kind of, it's indicative of the entire car normally. But this one turned out to be extremely, extremely nice. Even given the mileage, it was taken care of really well. Now it does have, this one has a few modifications to it. It has the older HKS exhaust system here. You can see is, you know, it has some surface rust on the exhaust, which I'm getting ready to exchange out this older HKS system for a newer Tomei system. And you can see I've already started that process right here. I believe it's pronounced Tomei. If I'm mispronouncing it, please let me know in the comments. I've got the equal length downpipes right here. I do have these things. I wrap these as well in heat wrap all the way down through here. And I do have the test pipe put on here. That made this exhaust, just putting on the downpipes, it made a huge difference, especially from a sound standpoint. Before, even with, you know, this exhaust system on it, it was extremely quiet. It pretty much sounded stock, as much as a stock one would sound. I've never heard a stock one other than videos. It was very quiet. Now with the equal length downpipe, the exhaust sounds really nice. It's still a little bit too quiet. Great for long trips where you know, doesn't drone or anything like that, but it needs to be a little bit noisier. We have the other Tomei exhaust system over there, which I believe just has a muffler and it does not have any resonator or a first or a secondary muffler here. As you can see here at the bottom, it's really a nice, clean car. Now, it does have the HKS system taken off, and so that was eliminated. I'm getting ready to, now I do have two other GT-Rs. I've got well, one of which you guys haven't even seen. Well, I haven't even gone over the other one, but I do have another R33 in here, and I have another one that I purchased over in the UK, and it's on its way here hopefully in the next month. But both those cars actually have the rear steer, the HKS system on it. This one does not. I prefer driving this car without it much more than my R33 with it. I know it's probably faster with it. It just gives you, without it, the car feels a lot more connected to the road. Doesn't feel like something's going on in the rear end of the car. This one here, you obviously see your tie rods right here. This one, I'm getting ready to replace both these tie rods. This one right here, the ball joint up here is a little bit loose, so this back wants to move just a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and replace both of those. Then I'm also doing, I'm changing the oil. But the steering rack, one of the things on these cars is I don't want to say they're notorious, well they are. The steering racks start to leak. I pulled the whole steering rack out. You can see it right here on the floor. I did have a run into a little bit of a mess. So the steering rack is right here. See here, the link's pretty loose as well. Normally these things should be fairly stiff. This one I can also move it back and forth a little bit, but it was starting to build up leaks here. This side as well, starting to leak through here in the boot. You can see right here it's coming, well, I pulled that one off, but same thing here, very, very loose. The whole rack needs to be completely rebuilt, so I have all the seals and everything ready to do it. Now, I've never rebuilt a rack like this before. I didn't want this car, as I hit my head on here, did this car, you know, sitting up on the lift while I learn how to rebuild a rack, because we have got to get the Challenge Stradale up on this lift and start doing the manual swap on that car. Besides, well, that's going to hold because I have to do maintenance on the Renault Turbo 2. I need to do a little bit of maintenance on the Cosworth RS and a couple other cars as well. That be it. Well, which is the reason why I'm getting to this. So I went ahead and purchased a not brand new, but a completely rebuilt rack out of Japan, and that just arrived. You can see here, these arms are much more stiff. So if you can, well, let me put my knee on this thing here and lift this. Well, that's not going to happen. I was going to show you how stiff these things are, because they are. There you go. That's about what they need to be. You don't want to have any play in the ball units here. This rack is getting ready to be put up in the R32 later on today. Hopefully I can get that done by the next couple hours and get this back on the ground. I probably should have lowered this car so you could actually see it, but I'll do another video on this car here very soon once it's all done. And I do actually have, I did just get brand new Yokohama tires mounted on the original stock rim. That about wraps it up, you guys. So I've got, like I said, I apologize, I have not done a video in quite some time, simply because I've been getting cars in, and these are the only 2 cars I've shown you, but since the last video, I've probably had at least 6 or 7 other cars on both of these lifts getting maintenance done. And I apologize. I need to pick up the camera more often and bring you guys up to speed on the cars that I'm doing maintenance on, because keeping, nearly 90 cars in my collection up and going all the time, I'm not complaining, because honestly, I enjoy doing this. I enjoy, don't get me wrong, on a nice day like it is today, out driving cars, but you've got to keep it maintained, otherwise you start having other issues. Maintenance is super critical, and it's something that has to be done. That being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Seriously, guys, I will make sure I'm kicking out more videos here in the very near future. So please be sure to subscribe if you'd like to get updates on various cars, and I'll bring you guys up to speed on doing some maintenance on the Renault Turbo 2, as well as the Cosworth and a few other cars. And we're going to be doing some more things to the Honda Civic back here. You can see here, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here. I did pull the exhaust off, and I did pull the old intercooler out right here. So it has been modified. It does have some modified parts on it now. You can see here a PRL intercooler on the front, as well as new skirting on the bottom. Before this turns into a 20-minute video, you guys, once again, you guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys again next time.